Hello, my name is Bailey Baker, and this is my presentation of my cultural project, and it is over the bubonic plague and the Black Death, or bubonic plague, also known as the Black Death, because they were the same thing. Over here is a map of the spread of the Black Death, and year by year, and it says the color. It has the color of where it started and then where it went to next. The Black Death, also known as the bubonic plague, is a pandemic that affected the continents of Europe, Asia, and North Africa. There were all types of symptoms, really, and from fatigue to fever to small lymph nodes to these buboes on the neck, arms, and groin, and then their flesh, their skin would turn black. These different symptoms were very progressive, and they would kind of go into one and into the other, and it wasn't a slow effect. It happened all at once, pretty much. There were 2 different outbreaks, I believe, of the bubonic plague, and that occurred. There was the ones that hit early were on the ports. The first plague was on the ports in Central Asia, and then went to all the ports. And then the later outbreaks were in the cities, the bigger cities. And this is a flea, which is said to be one of the carriers of the Black Death. This is the silk trade route, and this was a route that they used to deliver goods and trade, and also share ideas, because they didn't have the same means of communication that we do now, where we can just call and or see on the news. Say there was a disease in one continent and it might be coming over here. They didn't know that back then, so they depended on this silk road and trade route to deliver these ideas and get to and to be able to know things and know what was happening. And as you can see, Europe and Egypt and Somalia and India, they all had an area where it hit. And here, sadly, though, it also carried the spread of disease, and by people traveling, and it just kind of spread from, China to Europe and so on, and it kind of just kept going and going and going. And here is another picture of, well, I went too far. Another picture of the old trade route. It's kind of hard to see, but it says the silk and spices route, and where it hit. One of the continents that affected was Europe, and Europe was probably one of the most biggest areas that it hit. And it took quite the toll on Europe, and it took a while to get them back from that place. After the first 5 years, 25 million people died, and 1/3 of that was people in Europe, which I just found that number quite alarming. And here is, we all know where the continent of Europe is, but sometimes they can all mesh together. And here's the continent of Europe. And then it also went into, well, it started out really in Asia, because it was said to have reached China, I believe, in 1328, and it didn't reach Europe till about 1347. So it traveled fast, but also pretty slowly at the same time, because it took a while to get all the way around. It kept spreading through those trade routes that we talked about, and Right here you can see a picture of where it hit during each of these times, and you can kind of see where it might have went to next. It also affected parts of North Africa. North Africa is like Egypt and some of these continents right here. I mean, some of these countries, I'm sorry, that were in the continent of Africa. Like right in here, the upper part of it. And it was said, and maybe in Somalia was one of them. And it was said to not have reached past the Sahara Desert. And so here's another map. It didn't go super far down. It didn't go in South Africa or anything. It just stayed up top. Messina. Messina is probably where it really kind of started for Europe. Because according to History.com, even before death ships pulled into port of Messina, many Europeans had heard rumors of a great pestilence that was carving a deadly path across the trade routes of Near and Far East. From that point on, it kept spreading across Europe, Asia, and North Africa. And here's an old ship that would have been around during that time. And then here's the port of Messina. I think the ports are kind of where it started, and then from there, or also the trade routes, but from there it kind of kept going into the big cities, and there was several ports that hit, and Messina is just one of them. The next is the port Marseille. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, but the Port of Marseille is another port that was affected by the Black Death. I got to thinking, and I know personally, if I had been the one to just go up and discover all those people on the ship, I do not know what I would do. Like, that would sad me a great deal. And, I can imagine the horrors that these people went through. I'm starting to get emotional a little because I just think about it, and, my tears get to going. But here is a picture of the Port of Marseille, and then here is a picture of the Port of Marseille during the Black Death. It saddens me to see all that wreckage right here that occurred. And then another port is the Port of Tunis. The Port of Tunis, here's the entrance, and you can see the water right there. The Port of Tunis was one of the ports that was affected by the bubonic plague. Who's to say, but these ports is where it all I feel like all kind of started for Europe. And even this right here, this says the Black Death entered England in 1348 through this port. It killed 30 to 50% of the country's total population. So it kind of started out these ports and kept going in and in and in to these bigger cities. And that's why the bigger cities didn't get hit till last. Rome is one of these big cities that was affected. There's the Colosseum. I believe that it didn't start get to Rome till later, because like I mentioned before, is because it started out these ports and it just kept going in and in and in as more people brought it and tried to find safety, I believe. It is said that the cause of the Roman Empire's fall could have been the plague, but we quite honestly don't really know, because we don't know all the facts, and unless we really were those people, we might never know. We can predict, but we don't know for sure. Florence is another city that was affected. According to History Today, the tragedy was extraordinary. In the course of a few months, 60% of Florence population died of the plague, and probably the same portion in Siena. And here's Florence, and it's such a beautiful city. And then we come over here and we see the tragedy that occurred right here, and just all those people. And it's sad because they didn't have a burial all to themselves because there were so many. Paris is another well-known city that most people know, and that was affected by the Black Death, and it didn't reach Paris like Rome till quite later on, and because it started at this ports and then traveled to the big cities. This right here is a picture of a plague doctor, in which they had these masks that they used to stop the disease from contaging them. It kind of looks like a crow almost, but they tried to stop it during the early stages of the Black Death, but it didn't really work out quite well like they wanted. London was probably one of the last places to really get hit hard, and I believe that it kind of kept spreading. It kind of eventually just went that way, and it spread east and north. It kind of just went everywhere. It went all different directions. There are still different diseases, that we have today that affect people, but the catastrophe of the Black Death and how many bodies it piled up in so little time is really one I don't think I have ever seen in today's time. It's really sad that those people had to go through that back then. And now we have medicines that we use and different things and different remedies, and they didn't have that, and which is quite heartbreaking. Rats and fleas were said to be the main carriers of these diseases, and rats are kind of the staple. Like anytime I typed in Black Death, rats would pull up because they're said to be the carriers of the Black Death and bubonic plague. And then these rat fleas would get on these rats and then transfer over to humans. And then from there, humans would just spread the disease, and it got to all these places quite quickly. Although in some research that I found, different people have said that they don't think that rats and the rat fleas were the carriers. And like I said before, we don't know for sure. With all the research that we do, unless were those people during that time, we don't know for sure. I found this picture and I really quite liked it because it shows, the Black Death and all these rats around them, and then the plague doctor and kind of some different places, and then the ships and places that affected and that it went. And I thought that was a pretty interesting picture. I put it with the 5 themes of geography because of one of the reasons was because of location and the movement. The 5 themes of geography are location, place, human environment, interaction, and movement and region. The Black Death has several different themes of geography. To me, I think the main one would probably be movement, because the spread of the disease was by both rats, fleas, and people. And another one, quite possibly, would be region, is another theme used, because the disease was in certain regions like Asia, Europe, and North Africa. And, even human environment interaction, because, how we affected different areas. And then here are some of my citations that I used, and I thank all these different websites for the information that I gathered. Thank you, and I really enjoyed this class.